I'm here because outgoing ministers and MPs have offices to close and staff to thank and deputy ministers and officials to thank. So I'm here to do all of that.
Yeah, what's the last week been like for you?
Very tough. It's not easy losing on such a big scale. I think there are lots of questions about how we ran that campaign, but there'll be a caucus meeting next week. We'll talk about this.
Such as what? I mean, what do you feel? Do you feel like in any way that you were hung out to dry, like that you had lines that you had to go with that you weren't able to really say what you wanted to?
These issues are all issues that I've been associated with over years. You know, citizenship, strengthening that program, making more Canadian citizens than ever before, making sure the rules were clear, making sure the program was available and processing was faster than ever before. And then suddenly we ended up in a campaign talking about second-class citizens. I mean, that concept does not exist in Canadian law. It should not exist in political debate. We did not introduce it to the debate. When it was introduced by the party that's now won the elections, we didn't counter it enough. But it's painful to see people stoop to those levels, and for it to go unanswered by the other political participants and by commentators and media, and you know, we don't have room in this country for poison like that, and people deserve in an election to know what the law actually says, what protections they enjoy in this country, what opportunities they enjoy in this country compared to virtually every country in the world, but that failed to be communicated. And yeah, there was a change agenda. It's been 9 years. I said that on election night. That was the strongest feeling. But there were a lot of issues relating to citizenship, immigration, refugees that were turned to pretty unpleasant purposes. I mean, I spent 2 weeks being called a baby killer by other MPs and people in the media. That was not pleasant. We started bringing Syrian refugees to Canada on a large scale.
Nobody can disagree with that.
In January.
Nobody can disagree with what you guys did, but
nobody covered it at the time. And somehow it became divisive that we hadn't brought them all by, you know, the middle of the election campaign.
I guess what I'm saying is when you started accusing the media of not covering the subject, then you became the story.
And I feel strongly about that. This conflict in Syria has been going on for 4 years, and I will say in front of any camera, to any journalist, that this is the worst conflict of recent times. Much worse in terms of loss of life than both Iraq wars, all 3 Iraq wars if you count the current one. Much worse than Afghanistan during our time there in terms of loss of life. And the media coverage, the public attention to it has been lacking since 2011. These are the biggest terrorist organizations in the world. Yes, the international response has been weak because there's no appetite for it after 2 wars in Iraq and a long campaign in Afghanistan. But we need to pay attention because we are on one. And when these refugees, migrants showed up in Europe in massive numbers, it wasn't a surprise to me. We've been tracking this. We've been trying to respond. We've been trying to encourage other countries to respond in an organized way, resettling larger numbers of refugees to save lives and ensure that people didn't have to cross the Mediterranean and lose their lives at great risk. But none of that generated any profile. Instead, I still get people coming up to me and saying, "Oh, you hung up on Carol Off." That's the story. That people insist on telling that we are cold-hearted conservatives, that we've never done the right thing, and it's wrong. And you got to look at the facts. You've got to look at who showed leadership. There are still more Syrian refugees in this country than Barack Obama has brought to the United States. Has anyone covered that fact? It's a question of communications and campaigning and responding to accusations. Absolutely. All of that is at issue in the post-mortem that is taking place.
Was that from the top, though, or I mean,
like we all take responsibility as members of the team. Those at the top obviously have a special form of responsibility. I think they've all started to recognize where we fell short. I mean, listen, we had representation across the GTA, across all of urban Canada. Strong representation from new Canadians, from urban Canadians, from young Canadians. That fell away because certain messages weren't delivered and certain accusations were allowed to stand. We won a strong majority in 2011. We had strong support throughout this election until the last couple of weeks. There is strong support for balanced budgets, lower taxes, a strong Canada in the world, including strong refugee policy, a real discussion about where the Islamic State is going and what needs to be done to stop it. People aren't warm and fuzzy about politics, they're serious about politics and realistic about politics. And we're still the party that sees reality as it is, doesn't want to go on some hippie trippy jaunt down memory lane and put marijuana in the windows of every store. We're trying to deal with the real issues that Canadians are facing, and we will continue to do that. But yes, renewal is a serious process, and it's going to take time.
So is that how you see the Liberal Party right now? Hippie trippy, wanting to put marijuana in every storefront?
In part, yeah. I think they were in denial. They still are in denial about a lot of serious issues in the world. I didn't hear a lot of Liberals even mention the word terrorism. I've heard Liberals say that we shouldn't use that word because these are just misunderstood people. I heard the Liberal leader, the Prime Minister designate, say that on several occasions. And it pains me as someone who spent 6 years on behalf of Canada and the United Nations in Afghanistan and who worked for 2 years as Minister of Citizenship and Immigration to try and get a better response to Syrian refugees, to bring 23,000 Iraqi refugees to Canada. I've never seen one article written about that in this country. So let's pull up our socks, see the world for what it is, and ensure that this is still a great country. We're going to be the vehicle for ensuring that.
Last question for you. What's next for you? What are you doing next?
Got to get a job. I got to leave a job and then get a job.
Right? Stay in politics?
Welcome to the real world.
No, is 25,000 impossible?
Nothing's impossible, but cost, safety, the operational standards for which Canada is renowned are all issues. We have the best record in the world for refugee resettlement because we do it well. We meet certain standards. We check out who people are. We make sure human smugglers aren't involved. We make sure identity theft isn't involved. We make sure people are who they say they are. We make sure criminals don't benefit from Canada's generous refugee policies. And when you start moving large numbers of people in short periods of time, all of that can be compromised. So I would urge the government to do more on Syria, but do it carefully and ensure that Canada's best traditions and high standards in this area are respected.